Okay, well, I gather that everyone is here. We've got someone in person as well, holding on camera. So welcome to the first iteration of Rivers Reimagined. This will be an ongoing collaboration between the CMC and the Canadian League of Composers. Hopefully we'll be doing this once a month, sort of half presentation, half workshop on a number of different topics. Today we'll be starting with remote collaboration, remote rehearsal, remote performance. And obviously we've got some people here who are going to guide us through that. As we gather here together at the Canadian Music Centre and online, we want to acknowledge that the CMC is based in Takaranto, the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Takaranto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We thank the Indigenous people who share this land with us and allow us to be here as uninvited guests. The Canadian Music Centre, where we are right now, was founded in 1959 in the context of violent state policies targeting Indigenous communities, including the potlatch ban, 60 scoop, and residential schools. These policies were not part of some dark chapter that has ended and is in the past, as injustice and violence against Indigenous people are ongoing. Acknowledging the land is to acknowledge that the CMC and many legacy arts organizations within Canada have been a part of racist policies that devalue and seek to erase Indigenous cultural expression. Over the recent and coming months, the CMC is engaging in evaluations, and implementing policies guided by our Accountability for Change and the Indigenous Advisory Councils. This will include forms of redress connected to our existing collection of works, and will also guide our thinking about language, services, and programming now and in the future. Valuing a variety of traditions and approaches to composition will challenge some of the fundamental assumptions that shaped CMC services for decades. But we know that perceiving and valuing that wider virtuosity, creativity, and community through art making can allow the CMC to be a greater partner to artists. So I'll just do a quick set of introductions of who's with us here, and then I'm going to turn it over to Andrew because he has far more interesting things to say than I do. So that is Andrew Noseworthy. If he can give us a wave so we all know who he is. He's going to be leading the first part of this workshop. We've got Jerry Pergolesi joining us, who will be taking part in the, well, I guess he'll be both parts of the workshop.
We're kind of all leading it.
Yeah, you're kind of all leading it. Yes, it's a collective operation.
It's a collective, yeah.
We've got Jeff Morton, who's sort of the tech guru, making sure everything runs. So we'll get a lot from him. And we've got Tina Pearson as well, who will be taking part. And all of these good folks are connected to ContaQt, which is 21st century new classical and experimental music group that has done some super cool stuff in Toronto. They're often most associated with the Intersection Festival, which happens, well, I was going to say happens every year, but time has taken a weird shape in the past few years, but it did happen this year.
Back with a vengeance.
It's back with a vengeance, yeah. And we reached out to them to do this because really from the early days of the pandemic, they were right at the cutting edge of collaboration on the internet, and working from different locales and trying to adapt to the new reality that we were all faced with. And so this workshop will be them sharing their wisdom, their knowledge. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, and he's going to take it away.
Cool. So hi, everybody watching and in person. I think I'd actually like to, not to suddenly pass it off, but I think I'd actually like to pass it off to Jerry for an introduction. I think he should really lead off. He's been the kind of creative force and essentially the founder of ContaQt and Intersection since their beginnings, which I guess will be coming up on, what, 10, 15, 20 years ago now or so? It's
20 years.
Yeah, so I mean, I have lots that I'm going to say for sure, but I think Jerry is probably the best person to lead off here, if you're okay with that, Jerry, and then we'll all just start jumping in and going from there.
Sure. Oh, thank you. Well, thanks, first of all, for having us. It's exciting, kind of exciting to do this, to actually talk about what we've been up to for the last little while, because I think with the pandemic, everybody kind of retreated and now it's a matter of kind of people getting out back into the real world. But for the last couple of years, we've been existing in a virtual world. So first of all, I just want to say thanks very much to Joseph and August for inviting us to do this and organizing this. Andrew, for the organization that went around this, but I think the impetus to make this workshop happen was that Andrew acted as a festival coordinator for Intersection this year and did an amazing job. I've never seen someone do such a great job with so many presented with so many challenges. So he did a great job. So I want to thank Andrew for that and for being here, and Jeff and Tina for being here, because they have been an integral part of what we've been doing for the last couple of years. So actually this is I think between the four of us, there's a lot that has gone on that might not be apparent when we're doing what we're doing, but there's been a lot of work that's been happening that we've kind of just been doing just because we wanted to, for the most part. So I just kind of basically what happened was the pandemic was kind of a weird thing, I mean, for everyone, right? So when it hit, it kind of really brought to light an issue that was already kind of creeping in with ContaQt anyways. ContaQt is multi-located as an ensemble. We have people living in different cities. Our pianist, Alison Weeb, lives in London, Ontario. At one point in time, Andrew has lived in almost every major city in Southern Ontario in the last couple of years, something like that. I split my time between California and Toronto, and we have worked with collaborators from far. So obviously when, and Tina is one of the collaborators that we were actually in the middle of working with when the pandemic hit. And so basically what happened was we had toyed with the idea of like, how do we address not being in the same room at the same time in very, I would say, very basic ways, using what was available to us ahead of time. But when the pandemic hit, one of the other persons that we were collaborating with is Evan Ziporin, who is located in Boston. And he just simply texted me one day and said, do you want to try and play over Zoom, see if this will work? And we had released a recording a few years ago, our arrangement of discrete music, which is a kind of a, I would say kind of a classic electroacoustic piece, ambient piece by Brian Eno. We did an arrangement for live chamber music ensemble and released that a few years ago. So we've had a few different people play it with us, and Evan was one of those people who had done it with us. So he said, let's just try that, because that piece lends itself to kind of to the situation we were in. The situation we were in is that everybody was by themselves. And that piece, the way that Brian Eno describes it, is he took two distinct musical ideas, set them onto loops and let them run through the night, woke up the next morning to see what would happen. So the way that the live arrangement works is that you have these discrete musical ideas that are set by each player, and each player more or less does them. And the way the piece works is how these individual or discrete pieces of music interact with each other. So it's not so much that we're really responding to and reacting to each other. So that kind of lent itself to being in an online environment where latency becomes an issue and so on. So that, in other words, if someone wanted to respond to what somebody did, the chances are they heard that either a half a second or a second later than the person actually did it. So then when they're responding, there's another sense of delay. That didn't really affect this piece. That delay part was actually makes the piece work better. So the latency, or I'm using delay and latency interchangeably. So what we found out by doing that first experiment was that, okay, we can work, this will work, and there are some pieces that will lend themselves to doing this. But then Andrew and I started working experimenting with, well, what's out there that can make this work more efficiently, or where the sound will work better. because that became a huge issue, was the actual audio aspect of it, because on Zoom at that point in time, Zoom hadn't done a lot of work to develop their sound. So we started using different programs that are out there. We used when we really wanted to use something that was either readily available or free, because this was all being done basically out of the goodness of our, well, no one had anything to do for a long time, right? We were all sitting around baking bread, and so rather than bake bread, Andrew and I sat around and tried out different free software things that we could play together with. Now, one of the things that, and again, Evan Ziporin, who we had done this experiment with, kind of had he was one piece removed from the people who invented Jack Trip, which became part of everybody's consciousness, I think. And the way he did that was, he was basically talking to the folks in the Kronos Quartet who were using Jack Trip, and they explained the setup to him. So it was costly, number one, and number two, it was also the technology that had to go into it. Everybody had to be on an Ethernet. Then there needed to be a certain amount of megabits. If it failed, everybody had to, basically, power down and reboot. And so it had a lot of foibles. And also we just thought, well, we can't really make that kind of investment. So we kept, we tried a few different things. One of them being a podcasting software called CleanFeed. We actually did a performance using CleanFeed, a radio performance using CleanFeed. That, again, was just another step for us to figure out, well, okay, that wasn't perfect. It had its downfalls or whatever, but we were able to do it. And maybe Andrew can talk a little bit more about the details and how that worked and how that was getting to where we are now. And then a friend of mine, I'll just do a shout out to a friend of mine named Joe Carvello, who's runs a mastering studio called Joe Carvello Mastering, oddly enough, and also is one of the owners of Revolution Recording, where we were actually recording at the time. Basically suggested this plugin called ListenTo by a company called AudioMovers. That, I think, really set us to where, oh my goodness gracious. Andrew, you can take over because I forgot to plug my laptop in.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, good.
You're gonna see me scramble in a second. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's good timing. So yeah, so I think that's a great place actually to pick up. So CleanFeed was, the nice thing about CleanFeed is, hence the name, it was a very clear sound. So we kind of got off from using Zoom as a main, like only using our Zoom audio, even though we turned on original sound and turned on echo cancellation and all these other kind of Zoom for music settings that are in the settings. We're still finding that we wanted to prioritize a certain number of sounds. It would cut out certain people's tones or cut out certain people's audio if there's too many. It definitely still had some like settings involved with it. And so we tried CleanFeed, and CleanFeed kind of started giving us what we kind of wanted in terms of, there was no prioritization of certain people's sound. Everything was clear. Audio was mostly not cutting out. We would cut out every now and then, because as Jerry mentioned at the beginning, the nice thing, or the thing that was made this very kind of conducive to what we were already doing, is a good portion of Contact's rep, whether it be the Brian Eno arrangements or other ambient works, or kind of open and indeterminate or aleatoric works by different Canadian composers, that a lot of the music is not metrically synced in a certain kind of way. So it doesn't need to have a pulse to it. It doesn't need to. The biggest thing that we need to make sure is that we hear everybody's sound very well. So we're using CleanFeed, but we kind of want to take it a step further, because CleanFeed didn't really allow for a balance of the mix in the space, in the online space. It kind of didn't really allow for other kinds of options. And then so we started moving into getting everybody acclimated with DAWs and like interfaces and things like that. And this is kind of, I guess this is kind of where I jumped in like really, really heavily, because I've, as a composer and guitarist and somebody who works with electronics regularly since I literally started playing music, getting used to using like a digital audio workstation software like Ableton Live or Logic Pro or anything like that, was something that was kind of already ingrained or kind of needed as well as using an audio interface, using anything like that. So, but for other members of the ensemble, and one of the neat things about ContaQt and about this kind of music is that, it's not a part of everybody's language or everybody's like DNA or training or practice or whatever word you want to use to describe it. So for someone like Jerry and myself, we kind of launched into this. And then for other members of the ensemble, they kind of they kind of smiled and held on for dear life for the first little while, which was great. We like major shout out, I think, to the Sarah Fraser Rapp and Mary Catherine Finch and Alison Weed as well, because for like their patience of basically having to start from scratch. So they each got a simple interface, which I think a lot of people had this experience in the pandemic. It's time to go buy a Focusrite Solo or a Focusrite 2i2. I think their sales boomed for sure during the pandemic. And then so teaching them how to, use an interface, how to set a mic gain, how to use a mic on your instrument, put it into a DAW. So we ended up going with Ableton Live because a light version that worked for our purposes came with the interfaces. And I was already very acclimated to using Ableton Live and used to using it to the point where I could train them on how to use it and kind of get everybody up to speed on it. And then combining that with the ListenTo plugin was kind of the next step. So the interesting thing about the ListenTo plugin is that it was mostly designed so that producers and mixing engineers and basically audio engineers can quickly send back and forth mixes and get comments in real time. So a producer in a studio somewhere might be working on a mix or a master of a track, and he sticks a transmitter version of the plugin on, or they stick a transmitter version of the plugin on their master bus or on the kind of master track. They send out the mix that they're working on. Somebody else receives that with the receiver version of the plugin, and then they hear the mix in real time so that they can say, oh, can you bring this up? Can you change this? Can you do that? And well, we said, what happens if we just stick a bunch of receivers on a bunch of different tracks in a DAW software, and then each sent our signals to each of the receivers that everybody else is receiving. And then it almost works like a studio monitor room. So when you go into record in the studio, you sit in an isolation booth, you have a little box in front of you, and the box has a label of the different instruments who are also in isolation booths, and you can affect their volumes and affect it, and you can hear it through their headphones. And that's basically what we were doing with software. And then this will be a good moment, I think, to pass it off to Jeff now, actually, and Jeff can start talking about some of the tech things. Is that the next stage was that we all sent, after we would rehearse on a weekly basis, and I think eventually we'll get into the rehearsal and the practice part of this and like the process, because I think that is just as important, if not more, than the technical aspects. But we decided, well, okay, this plugin is relatively inexpensive. Everybody was already investing in interfaces anyway, because their teaching gigs or other gigs required them to get interfaces and to get software and to record things for their students and to do this. Like Alison Weed, for example, teaches at Western University and had to acquire the software in order to teach online with her students. So we were already kind of moving in this direction. And then it was just a matter of implementing this plugin into the DAW software. And then that's kind of where Jeff comes in, because for our normal rehearsals, we send our signals to each other using this plugin, which you'll see in a moment when a number of us share our screens and things. But for a performance, it's really nice to have, just like in a live environment, to have somebody behind the board mixing, so that they're kind of controlling how everything goes and then sending that out for the final performance. And that's kind of where we brought Jeff in there. So Jeff, do you want to actually take it from there? I think it's a great.
Before we go there, I do want to say, like, there are two things to this, and obviously, Andrew's pointing towards Jeff, and the one thing, and I wanted, the point that I want to make is that the technology part of it worked. It was something that was kind of, we were working on as we were going and learning as we were going. The other part that we were working on was where is why Tina is sitting there so patiently and lovely. We kind of did these things concurrently, where we had to not only learn how to, as Andrew said, the other members of the group had never plugged in their own mic before, much less set up an interface, set up some software, and then even like learn, like we had to experiment with different kinds of mics for violin and cello and so on. And I don't think Allison had ever set up like MIDI channels for herself using an electronic keyboard. So there was all that technology part of it. What went hand in hand with that was learning how to play online such that it was meaningful. So I just want to set that out right from the get-go. And I'm sorry, I would have done that if I hadn't had to get up and plug my laptop in. So in other words, this discussion is more it's more of a whole. It's not quite as linear as like, oh, we got the technology done and then we started working on this. These really went hand in hand with each other, because as we were learning more and more about the technology and what technology we could use, we were little by little and incrementally learning about how to actually, for lack of a better word, behave online, listen, play, and do these things. So yeah, we'll hand it over to Jeff to kind of get that part in, and we'll be bringing Tina in at some point to kind of talk about what I was just talking about and how they kind of merge and work together. So.
Thanks, Jerry. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be able to join in this meeting, this workshop today. Really great to have the chance to work with ContaQt with Jerry and Andrew and Tina. Always great to have that opportunity. So happy to be here. I used to spend time at the CMC, so I know the room that some of you folks are in. I no longer live as close to there. So I'm based in rural Southeast Saskatchewan, Treaty 2 territory, land of the Cree, Assiniboine, Saulteaux, Dakota, and Nakota peoples, and traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. I live remotely on an acreage, so it's just sort of a kind of an interesting way that I can be connected to the scene through this kind of remote mixing and live stream production, that kind of thing. I have a little bit of experience doing this over the last few years. Most prominently with Of the Now, an artist collective based in Victoria, BC. We had a project called Decolonial Imaginings with Dylan Robinson. It was kind of like a mix of a study group, creation, residency, professional development kind of activity that resulted in a website and a series of videos, and then creations that were expressed through podcasts, more or less. You can check that out online. It's a good project, but that sort of got me up to speed on some of the software that I'm going to share here today. I've also done some things with an art gallery where I'm a curator here in Saskatchewan, the Godfrey Dean Art Gallery. We partnered with Sekewawak First Nations Artist Collective and did an online collaborative drawing jam. So kind of similar, everyone had to talk, everybody had to be in a meeting, but they also had to interact with this shared collaborative drawing application. So different kind of context, but a couple different ways that I'm doing this kind of work. And then with ContaQt, of course, this is more related to live performance. I've just got basic tools, a home studio, I've got a laptop and an audio interface, simple microphone. I'm just using the laptop mic here today because I couldn't get my other one to work. So, this is not particularly complicated stuff. It's just a matter of, figuring out how to use these softwares. Some of them are free. None of them are particularly expensive, or for the ones that are, there are alternatives. So here, what I will do is I'll start by showing you the Ableton Live set I have. So you can use any kind of, live mixing software like this. Hopefully everyone can see this. As you might expect here, you've got, the different musicians coming in, Andrew, Jerry, Tina's sending 2 signals, and I have 4 generic slots in case somebody else had joined today. So don't know if we'll use those or not. And then on the left is the fixed audio track. The plugin that Andrew mentioned is called ListenTo. Oh, you know what? I bet that doesn't pop up for you, does it?
Oh, no,
Nope, we've got it.
Really? You can see the AudioMovers plugin? Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's really, it's as simple as it's like a virtual audio cable. Andrew's sending me a signal. I get it here into the mix. When you look down below, you'll see I'm sending everything to a series of return tracks. And this is a really important aspect of this kind of arrangement, this setup, is that I can send back a mix to each individual musician that includes every other musician, but not themselves. So we don't run into the problem of feedback. And then I'm able to create a mix and even out everybody's sounds, and everyone is getting an accurate representation of that, total mix, just with their own part missing. So here we've got Andrew, and you see the return track A is reduced to 0, whereas the signal that I'm sending to Andrew, and here's what the other ListenTo plugin looks like, is, so just behind the scenes, you plug in a link and you hit go. It is sending out to Andrew the full mix of everything here, with minus the his own signal. What else did I want to say here about Ableton? Yeah, typical multi-track arrangement. The sound quality with ListenTo is quite good, especially for monitoring. But the other trick that we will do is local recording during performances or rehearsals, because we can then sync those up after the fact, and the local recordings that the individual musicians make are the full quality audio. ListenTo does compress the sound somewhat. Not something that you would really notice, when you're performing, but if you want the best quality result, that's a strategy. Okay, yeah, and then the last part from Ableton is that I'm sending out the mixes to all the individual musicians, and I'm also sending out the audio through internal sound routing. I use Soundflower. There's lots of options out there. And that's sending the total mix into a program called Streamlabs, and that's the live stream software that I'll show next. Okay, stop that. And
Important to mention very, very quickly too, that today's stream is happening, and today's performance at the end of it will be happening from the Zoom audio here within the CMC. So here within the CMC, Joseph Glazer in the back, another guru of sorts, has taken a feed from my interface and it will be sending that out through the Zoom call and through the YouTube stream. So that will basically be the same thing as if Jeff or anybody else sent it out, but in the act of a performance that's not at another place, that would be what Jeff is using Streamlabs.
oh, do we have a? Yeah, so the plugins in the chat, I don't have to put that in there. So ListenTo from AudioMovers. There's 2 plugins. One's a receiver, one's a transmitter. And we keep a Google Doc with the links. It's all just web links that the plugins generate. So you can share that with the person who you want to receive what you're sending. And likewise, you can paste in the link that they send you to receive what they're sending. Pretty simple stuff. Once you've got the whole setup. Okay, so I'm going to show you Streamlabs, and this is a really important part of the live stream aspect of what we did, for example, for Intersection Festival. Think, local cable access TV kind of production in your pocket. This is free software. It's pretty basic. I won't spend too much time on this, but just for folks who are interested, here on the left, you have different scenes. Each scene has different sources, different kinds of elements. So you can see here, I've got this starting soon. If I mute that, we lose that little bit of text. You can move it around, etc. It's quite tactile as a program. And as you move through the different scenes, you get to, it's like you're controlling multiple cameras or sort of producing the live stream that way. This was the main window that I used. So there's a few elements on here. It's obviously, you've got all of these different sources. I had on the top left-hand corner here, the Intersection Festival logo, sponsor logos, partners, etc. at the bottom, and the title of the event. This black area is empty right now, but I will cut to some documentation from the performance just to give you a sense here of what it looked like. There's no audio playing, but so that's where I populated then the video feed that I got from a Zoom call that we were all on. Streamlabs is pretty simple. You're just fading between different scenes. You set it up. It's like Microsoft Paint or Photoshop, I guess, if you work with that. It's really basic stuff though. So there's limitations, but I guess like cable TV station, it's what you do with it. It's not going to look like it can't do everything, but it can do a lot nonetheless. Live streaming from Streamlabs, then I won't go into the settings, etc. But what I did was I live streamed to a service called Restream, and Restream sends it on to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And live streaming to Twitch is, you might reach an audience there. There are quite a few people working in in that platform, on that platform, who would be interested in this kind of work. But also importantly, it's easy to embed a Twitch video into a website. So often when I'm doing work with different organizations and galleries, we'll direct people to the website of the organization where there's a video, and then you don't have advertisements popping up. You don't have the kind of litter or detritus around the YouTube video that you're watching, all the suggested videos, that kind of thing. It can sort of clean up the presentation a little bit, which is nice. So then the final thing I want to show you is the Zoom software, how that works. So you see here, this is like, it's scrolling by. That's a simple effect in Streamlabs. And obviously it looks like a Zoom call. I don't need to switch up here. Everybody knows what Zoom looks like right now. But some of the advantages of working this way, for example, was here, I'm going to switch to the introduction. Again, no sound on this. But when we introduced the concert for Intersection, Andrew held his phone up as sort of like a, camera guy. And Jerry made an introduction. We used the microphone on the camera and or on the phone and the camera, obviously. So it was a really dynamic and sort of personal way of adding this introduction to the beginning of the performance. So I like that quite a bit. Another thing that's really interesting about this setup is because I'm in the Zoom call and everyone can hear me, but I'm pulling the audio from the Zoom call, like for Jerry's introduction. I'm not in the audio feed. So we have this built-in capacity for me to talk back to everybody in the call, but that doesn't get onto the live stream. So I could do a count-in, for example, when I was starting the fixed audio track to let everybody know that we're starting, and my voice doesn't get into the mix. Some kind of a cool side effect of the way that this is set up and useful for coordinating a live performance. So I think that's it. I'll just add maybe the last thing here is I went kind of quickly through this stuff. If anybody's interested in learning more, I'm definitely available to answer questions, tutorials, workshops on this kind of thing. Like I say, it's basic stuff, but I can get you started real quick, or obviously you'll find a lot of information online too. So thank you very much.
If I can pull this, sorry, Dan, did you want to, I was going to just pull a couple of things around. Jeff alluded to the fact that that one of the great byproducts of the way that we set up is that we can actually record everything we do remotely. So or locally. So in other words, when each of us is like right now, the four of us that are in this conversation are in different places. Obviously, those who are at the CMC are in Toronto. Jeff is where he said he is. I'm in California, and Tina is coming to us from
the Klingon territory on the Pacific coast.
So we're all in very different places, and even as we were sound checking, we had a very wonderful moment together. So I don't know, is it possible for us to show what one of our screens looks like? Because as someone who's actually, do you want to share your screen, Andrew? Do you want to do that? And
Jerry, if you're, I was thinking that actually I haven't joined the call on my computer here that's running things for CPU reasons, but I think maybe what we should do is, you, and I can even mention this a little bit as a preface too, you can share your screen that shows your setup.
Yep.
And also, if Tina, if you could also share your screen that shows your setup, because Jerry's Ableton session right now is kind of a makeshift version of when we rehearse. So I can actually talk through this just very quickly and fill in some blanks too, potentially. So Jeff's, the way the plugin, like we mentioned a couple of times ago, the way the plugin works is that you set up a transmitter on a track, you start your stream, it generates a link. Someone else sets up a receiver on a track in the software, puts that link in, connects to it, and then receives it to that track. So when Jeff does it as like a master mix, like you mentioned, he's sending everybody or sending out different singles to a bunch of different sends and then sending them back. Whereas when we rehearse, and I'll let Jerry take over here, when we rehearse as Contact without Jeff, this is our setup here now for it. So you'll see on Jerry's screen, he has a bunch of tracks named with all the players, and all of the players that are not him all have a receiver, which have those corresponding links, while his track has a transmitter. And my version of this setup would be pretty much the same thing, except for my track has a transmitter and Jerry's would have a receiver for it. And it depends, of course, which DAW you use for how you set the plugin up in the software. But once you have a handle of that, using the plugin is that's pretty much all it is. setting up a transmitter, generating the link, sending that link to somebody, and then they put it into a receiver. So Jerry, do you want to go from there and show a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So as Andrew was saying, so this is now I've grouped when I rehearse with the band, I have 2 different trumpet tracks, a wet track, which is the one that you're seeing right now down here with the effects on it. I have a dry track. I have a vibraphone track. I have MIDI as well for the because it's a MIDI controller, and I have marimba as well. Now I have all of my instruments are fed into my track under my name, Jerry. So basically, this is all that you have here. This is the ListenTo transmitter that I have plugged in, and I am sending this. What you do is you get this is what it looks like here, and basically what I would do is copy the stream link. And you click on it, it's been copied, and then I either put it into a database, as Jeff had alluded to earlier, or we would just email these around to each other, and everybody would just copy that link which this generates, and then throw it into, for instance, I would take Andrew's, and it looks exactly the same, the ListenTo receiver. I would open it up, and I would just basically paste that link into here, and now Andrew and I are communicating through our DAW, and so Andrew can hear me on the channel that he has assigned to me, and I can hear Andrew on the channel I have assigned to him, and I'm only hearing Andrew through that way, and that goes for everyone here. So as you can see, I have all the different members of ContaQt sitting here. And then and our collaborators. Here's Tina here, so what this does, as Andrew was saying earlier, it really simulates being in a recording studio where everybody is in an isolation booth, and even when you're depending on the kind of recording studio, if everybody's still sitting in an isolation booth, you can have eye contact and so on, and that's where Zoom comes in. I don't know if we made the point that what we do is we still use Zoom and or Skype as a communication tool. So we actually all try to get on use a separate device for the Zoom call or the actual, Zoom or Skype or something. So that's the call, and that basically happens independently. And then what we do is we use Ableton again independently, and that audio is just for playing. So in other words, for us to see each other, and then communicate, have a discussion, so on. We do that through Zoom and or Skype, and then when we're actually playing, we're doing that only and solely through Ableton, or through Ableton using these plugins, which means that we have to be really conscious of muting ourselves at the appropriate time. So because there can be an issue of feedback. And so on. Again, this is all just little technical things that you just learn as you go. But I think, have we covered most of the things? Because I think now is a great time to start talking to Tina, letting Tina talk about her practice, because I think of all of us, the one person who's been working in a virtual space longer, and Tina, you obviously take it away. I mean, you can talk about your practice and how you got to where doing what you're doing so that you could actually guide us to do what we were doing, and where these worlds meet. So I'd like to introduce Tina, who's sorry, one last thing is what I did mention, that we were in the middle of recording projects. One of them was with Tina, and the piece that Tina wrote for the band wasn't necessarily written for this environment, but we are currently in the process of working and making it work. And so it's almost becoming a new piece. But again, I think I've said enough. So Tina?
Okay, hi. Thanks, Jerry and Jeff and Andrew, and thanks for the invitation to be part of this. I'm here in Lekwungen territory, unceded lands, Coast Salish people, and I've been here for uninvited guest for about 15 years or more. Yeah, all that tech stuff has my head swirling. I think that thinking about the piece that we made, I mean, I think of it as kind of a collaboration in a lot of ways rather than a composed piece. It's like a facilitated composition, and I think that the intentions of that piece really lend themselves to moving into remote work, because it was a piece where how I've been working a lot the last number of years is considering the place where we are. You know, I don't know where everybody is who's part of this, but I've been at the CMC in Toronto too, and I'm thinking about that room. I'm thinking about where I am, where all of us, where our feet touch the ground. Thinking about the ancestries and the backgrounds of everybody who's involved, the performers, the materials of our instruments. And the piece was that we're working on was made to be performed in the Allen Gardens Conservatory in Toronto, which, as probably many of you know, is a place where there is a lot of invasive species, I call them, but migrated species that aren't indigenous to here, that were put in this kind of enclosed space for people to see. So the piece is kind of a reflection on all of that, and so translating it to remote connections has, I guess, got deeper into those kinds of things. I've been working in remote connections or telematic work since about 2007 through Skype. Pieces, not just using Skype to play, but thinking about what that environment is and how do we see, how we hear, how we're present in that place, and working in the 3D online environment Second Life with the Avatar Orchestra, working a lot with Pauline Oliveros, co-creating distant pieces that use a number of different technologies. So my experience with that has taught me that it's really easy to leave the body and to get really, you know, we kind of want to go into the screen. And so a lot of the work I've been doing in that world connects back to the breath and the body, and a kind of a way of listening or recognizing that how we can listen in these places is really different. And although it's limited, you know, I would love to be in the same space as you all, there's also some interesting opportunities that can come from that. One of the first things I learned in working in Second Life, and a lot of people in the deep listening community were involved in this in the first few years, was that the way we listen is really, really different and almost enhanced, because you're not sure, we are working with avatars, so you don't see the people, you're not sure who's really there or what's happening, so you're really kind of putting your imagination and your listening out in a different way. And you're also listening to all the sounds that are coming from the actual, from the technology, and realizing that everybody's listening from a different device, a different kind of device, different speakers. They're in a different place. Some people might be hungry, different time zones. So this kind of idea of this really interesting electronic and ethereal kind of space that we can all be connected in has quite a life. It's quite an interesting landscape. So in working with ContaQt, what we started working with, I can't even remember how long, it was a couple years ago when we started, was it? I think it was quite a while back. Yeah, and as Andrew said, I think many of the ensemble members hadn't even worked with microphones before. So it was quite an interesting process, and we started working really with touch and just how each person was, you know, working with their instrument, the microphone, the breath, and then one of the things that working with this kind of technology, especially with what Jerry and Andrew showed you about the ListenTo plugin, is that you can listen to each person individually. And so when you're in a concert situation or even at the CMC, you're listening to people play, there is kind of an intimacy there. You can hear the wood and the strings, and it's just, you really miss that when you're listening to an online concert sometimes, I think. But one of the things that is amazing about listening when you're playing together this way is you can hear the guts touching the string. You can hear people breathing. It's much more intimate, and you can choose to listen, to different people in different ways. So it's a really kind of, even though you'd think it's the opposite, it affords more intimacy in some ways. So we spent quite a bit of time kind of stepping back and working with slowing everything down to think about what is this space that we're working in. What is it like? What is it? How can we feel it? Can we taste it? Can we smell it? What's going on with our bodies when we're in it? So we went through, a number of exercises and processes to do that. Andrew, you said something the other day about that I forget.
Yeah, I won't take too much of because you're saying amazing things that are so important to talk about here, but
Andrew,
Oh.
could you talk a little bit slower and
Yeah.
a little bit, it's a little bit hard to hear you.
Oh, it's okay. Can you hear me now? Is it
Yep. Yeah,
better?
slower and loud is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry. So yeah, and I think I'll hand it back to you in a sec as well too, because I think you're saying so many important and amazing things right now. But yeah, when we were discussing it a couple of days, I wanted to make sure to also mention that this whole process that Jerry and Tina and Jeff and I and all the members of ContaQt is not like it's been an ongoing process that's kind of moved in this direction. And Tina coming in to do these kinds of exercises and talk about the practice with us and stuff really guided a lot of the members into this kind of space, into this process, because Jerry for a number of years wanted to work towards amplifying the group and using effects on a lot of different instruments, and a lot of the players were in different places or had to be in different places at different times. So Jerry was already thinking about this. Myself, I feel like I say this all the time, but before I was 19 or 20, I lived in Labrador in a quite isolated place, and the only way that I was able to get training and go to quote unquote music school was I was doing video conferencing lessons, and I've continued to do online collaborations with friends in New York and St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador ever since then. So like these things are kind of a part of an ongoing process. And anyway, where I'm tying this back is that a lot of the members through Tina's work, they felt like they were connecting with a lot of this music and connecting with this space, probably or potentially more than they ever have before. The idea of being able to now regularly rehearse every week, even though we're in a different place, to kind of take that time and breathe and connect with the touch and the breath of your instrument while playing this music made them kind of live inside that space a whole lot more. I don't know if I'm articulating all that maybe as well. Is that what you mean? Like a lot of the players even vocally said afterwards, like I feel like I'm really getting this music, or I feel like I'm really understanding this music, which is, kind of ironic in a way. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, and I think that I'll just maybe wrap this up because I see the time's going fast. I think once you start to find some kind of ease with connecting in that way, there's also thinking about what we're giving to whoever's witnessing or listening or watching. And we're not in a concert hall anymore, and so we're in a different kind of space. And I think that the next stage is thinking about what is it that we're offering through, like, here we are, we're looking at each other's faces and whatnot. And so when we can amp up the technology, like Jeff and Andrew and Jerry, have worked toward, and we can then okay, practice this and think about what it's doing, then what is it? There's so many ways we can think about what we can offer to people who are witnessing, rather than just, okay, let's replicate a concert in the best possible way. It's like, well, this isn't a concert anymore. We're out of that now. So where can we go with it? And I think that it's pretty exciting to think about how we might do this in a really conscious and mindful way. About where we're putting our bodies and what land we're on and how we're bringing that into the space. Thank you.
I can maybe add to that, or just kind of add something. I really do want to stress how, you know, this has been a learning process for quite some time. This has kind of been an integral part of many projects, as when August was talking about the introduction, this has kind of made its ContaQt has been doing this. I would say ContaQt was kind of like the nucleus of where we're at. This was also, it worked its way into Intersection this year through another project that I have going on called Liminal. That is a duo with Louise Campbell, who's based in Montreal, and we recorded an entire CD using this method, and it not only got the job done, but it also really changed the way we were playing. And Andrew just alluded to this, is that everybody in the band really has expressed at one time or another how it's really changed their relationship with playing overall, not only online, but they said it's going to change the way that they play in person as well. And that has everything to do with listening and so on. One of the things that that I guess the point that I started to make just a moment ago was, one of the fears that I had is, well, when the pandemic's done, we're going to go back to what we went back to, because everybody was saying return to normal. And I remember one of the things I was saying, like a mantra, there is no normal. So, or if you think back to where we were when the pandemic hit, if that's the normal everybody wants to return to, well, I want no part in it. So any other kind of radical and thing that you want to think about, but I kind of had this fear that, oh, well, we're going to go back to, well, we're going to abandon all of this and then go back to the practice that we were doing before. But I see this what we're doing as really we've just scratched the surface of what we're doing, and the potential that this has is really quite amazing. And I know that everybody keeps talking about the latency being an issue. I mean, that's just that's an embedded and inherent part of it. And if it's something that we can all get past at some point, as technology gets better, as internet gets better, and so on, great. If it doesn't, well, that's just fine, because at this point in time, I don't think that that the latency issue has really and it's something that we've really thought. It hasn't been at the forefront of our thought. So what that means is once you, and as Tina was saying, there's certain things that aren't the same. But once you embrace everything that this has to offer, then I think you can really see the potential in what this has to do. And this has really affected the 3 recording projects that I was personally involved in, 2 of them being ContaQt projects. It's really affected them. And I think they've made, it's made them better. We're still in the process of working on them, but we actually went back and kind of started from scratch, because we wanted to use everything that we've learned in the last couple of years to kind of integrate that into the recording, thinking that this was going to make it a much better recording at the end of the day. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. If there's anything that anyone else wants to add, should we be wrapping up?
We should play. Maybe time to play. Maybe do you want to intro your piece, Jared, and then while you're doing that, I'll set up a little bit. We'll kind of get going as you can intro a little bit, maybe, unless anybody else wants to say anything.
Just I think while we're setting up, if people have questions, this would be a good time, I think.
I'll give a quick intro while if people have questions. Get this piece is called Red. As I just alluded to, as to the different recording projects I had going on, and what was mentioned about how this technology helped Intersection do a hybrid performance this year. It was a premiere of a piece called Rainbow with a project called Liminal, myself and Louise Campbell. The piece that we're about to perform is actually a test piece. The piece wasn't really conceived to be necessarily done online, but the idea was it had to do with place, where I am, and thinking of being in another place and so on, and being displaced. So this is actually a test piece for a much larger piece. So it's in total about 10 minutes. I'm not really sure what else to say. The red is one of the colors of the rainbow that it alludes to, and I think that's pretty much it. And this is actually an example. The reason we're doing this piece today is because this was a piece that wasn't necessarily written for this environment, but is one of those pieces that translated to this environment nicely enough that it makes sense. And then as we're performing it, it gave us the opportunity to reimagine the piece in this environment. So I'm going to turn things on and get set up.
You're
Jeff, maybe also, just because there's a little bit of a time on this, just let me know, maybe give us like a little bit of a countdown when you're starting the fixed audio. And we'll
Sure.
make thumbs up, maybe like looks like Tina's already muted herself. Once Jerry has muted himself, maybe everybody can give a thumbs up. I'll get August to mute me, and then you can give me a countdown. It doesn't look like there's any other questions in the chat, so I mean, I'm ready whenever you would like as well.
I've got Tina's signal coming in, no problem.
Oh yeah, she has my signal. So here, let me.
I'm gonna mute you then now.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, got you, Andrew. Yeah, and Jerry as well. Okay, so we'll mute ourselves on Zoom. I'll give us a visual, like a 3, 2, 1, when I hit go on the fixed audio. Sound good? All right. So if we're ready to go, here it is. Sorry, guys. I don't think we're doing anything right now. Apparently, it's not coming through on the CMC side, or not getting into the Zoom call. So why don't we get that sorted?
You're unmuted now.
Muted now.
So I think it's just routing the outputs through your 3 and 4 out of there.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm not getting any.
You're not getting the audio from me? Just 1 second, Jeff.
I still have you unmuted, Andrew.
That's okay. Actually, it doesn't look like it's doing much feedback or anything.
Okay.
It might be worth mentioning that more than half of our rehearsals were spent troubleshooting, especially at the beginning. This is just par for the course.
Joseph, are you getting anything now? Is it working?
No, I don't know.
But you had it before, right?
No.
Oh. I guess one other possibility is to see if Jeff can route it through Zoom.
Yeah, so you'd have to reinitialize it.
Maybe, but he's still receiving everything. So
Yeah.
he should be able to run his audio through it as his Zoom input. Let's ask Jeff.
Yeah.
Hey, Jeff.
I have him muted. Hold on. Yeah, you're good.
Hey, Jeff.
Yep.
There's the interface here, like the Black Magic is, I think it's Black Magic is just simply not getting my level. Are you able to send your Ableton level, like your master, to the Zoom call as the Zoom audio?
I can do that, but then I can't monitor. I won't be able to hear what you're doing. So we can do that and hope that the levels are good, but I won't have any way of knowing that.
Okay. Our levels were pretty good before when we were playing together, right? Everybody heard everything okay? It's up to you guys. Do you guys want to try that?
What's the other option?
I'm not really sure what the other option is because it's just simply not getting a signal to that interface.
Could Jeff simply just set up a stream?
Yeah, why don't I send you a listen to link and you can grab it from like I think you can grab it from the internet even.
Yeah, I think that might be better because then he can still monitor.
Okay, let's try this.
It feels
I'm gonna
safer
drop-
having him do that, I think.
I'm gonna drop this in the chat, and if you can follow that link from the and route on that. Well, I guess maybe it's the same problem on on that side. I don't know if you can get audio from a web browser into the Zoom call.
Let me ask Joseph.
Oh, sorry, I'll send that to everybody here, just in case.
So basically anybody could listen to the session.
Yeah.
From this link. Because
Yeah, that's true.
the way to do it, and maybe send that to the YouTube.
I want to speak a little bit.
You're down.
So, oh, you can turn up a little bit though, so I can hear Jeff a little bit. So Jeff, Joseph is going to start listening on that end, and then basically just share his sound in the Zoom call.
Yeah, that should work.
Yeah, so that should work, right? So let's make sure that works. So you can start the fixed, and then we'll try that out.
Okay. I'll do a proper count in, but even just now to confirm that it's there. Here comes that fixed audio. Oh, was that coming through?
Is that working, Joseph? Huh? Oh, well, that's not useful. You want me to mute it out here? Huh?
Jeff, want to try it now?
Yep.
Use it up there in August.
Yeah, so that's looking good. I can see that coming through the web browser there.
Okay, so I'm unmuted there.
You're unmuted.
Okay, so Jeff.
Yeah.
It sounds like when Joseph shares his audio from that stream, it's coming through, right? Can you hear that too?
I'm not sure because I'm hearing the live session, so I'm not sure if I'm hearing the Zoom there. So that's a little tricky.
August turned up his like his call in the Zoom call here, and it was coming out of the speakers here. So it does sound like that is the case.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the Zoom audio.
Yeah, he's got the Zoom. Yeah, he's got the Zoom audio playing through a different set of speakers, and that played back the fixed audio.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're good to give it another try.
Okay.
Do you want to try it again?
Joseph, can you unshare your screen?
Here, you have to do just the audio portion of it. One sec. So we'll just try one more test. Jeff, if you play back the fixed audio, August is going to bring up the speakers to double check.
Here it comes.
Am I now unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Okay, so we're getting that over here. August's Zoom call computer is getting it. If somebody else, can you hear that? Maybe somebody else can say in the chat if they hear that.
Well, I can hear it on the Zoom call.
Okay. So then
I'm going to suggest that Jerry and I turn off our Zoom volume.
yeah.
And Andrew, I guess you're out of luck, but yeah.
No, I'm good because August will just turn down his speakers and then I'll come out of mine. So I think we're good to give him another shot.
Take two.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay.
See, this is what we spent 2 years doing, running into things like this and then figuring them out. Usually it takes an hour to do it though.
Okay, I'm about to mute you.
Okay, do it and then yeah, you turn down this.
Okay, I'll give you a 3, 2, 1 visually here again in just a moment.
Cool. I hope everybody heard similar to what we heard in the space.
I was checking, it's fine. Good.
Yeah. Maybe, does anybody have any questions? Maybe some hearts, yeah.
I actually do have a question, even though I'm not technically a participant. I do have a question
Are
that,
you allowed to do that as a CLC staff, or are you allowed to ask questions?
Joseph, am I allowed to ask a question? I guess this is for whomever. So you guys mentioned like there's a bit of the technology sort of lends itself to a certain style of music, a certain like ambient sort of spacey kind of vibe, which is super cool. My question is, like, as a composer who is maybe a bit more like rhythmic material, slightly more groovy, sort of almost like interlocking rhythmic patterns, that kind of thing. Is the technology going to get to a place where we might be able to get that kind of stuff to work online, or are we just sort of SOL with that kind of style of music in an online space?
We have done time-oriented pieces, maybe a little more loosely than say stuff that's interlocking. Actually, one of the things we did was, we compensated by doing something that was a bit slower. A piece called Not Yet Remembered. Actually, we also did a piece by Andrew at one of the performances that basically had downbeats and things like that. But in terms of how, I think it's really kind of just gonna have to experiment with it. We did experiment with a few things. This piece is decidedly the way that it is. It was written for a more cavernous kind of environment. When it was premiered in a giant, large space that had a lot of ambience in the room. So we've experimented with it, so it can be done.
Yeah. I hear you about thinking that it lends itself to continuous sound. But it's possible for sure to do pieces where there's space in between the sound. I think if you're looking for really complicated interlocking rhythms, I think the thing that I like to say is if say you're accustomed to playing in a studio and in a small concert space, and then you decide you really want to work for a couple of years in the Grand Canyon where everyone's spread around, you need to think about what your repertoire should be, and what is it that you want to be doing. So I think that with this kind of situation, another thing to remember is that everybody has a different computer. Everything's different. It depends on the kind of computer people have, the internet they have. All of that stuff is absolutely, it's part of the instrument. I think that Jack Tripp and a couple of other higher, like the universities are developing. They're trying to develop technologies where you can play more in sync. And they're, I have to say that it's usually pretty good with the ListenTo, and my group, we also use Sonubus, which is pretty good for latency. But I think if you're looking to get really exact rhythmic content, it'll be a challenge. That doesn't mean to say that you can't play stuff that isn't continuous, where you're really listening for, say, call and response or hocketing or that kind of thing. It's quite interesting to do that.
I could add a couple of very quick things to that as well too, that I think Jerry alluded to, that we tried some things like this before. So we tried one piece of mine before, where everybody kind of starts out almost like it's almost like an early Andreessen or like a Jevsky style piece, where everybody starts out on a motive and then slowly kind of moves off into their own world. And there's moments of the piece where downbeats do come together, and those worked. So maybe things like in specific metric blocks one by one are not ideal, but things that are rhythmic do work in that kind of way. The other one we tried was, Jerry mentioned Not Yet Remembered, and Not Yet Remembered is interesting because it's everybody is basically swelling in and out on downbeats for most of it, but the piano is always playing a straight chord. Well, it's notated in eighths on that, but a straight quarter note rhythm. The piano is just constantly going do 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 steady the whole time. And one thing we did learn is that the audio never messed up to the point where that was no longer steady. So even though we didn't have to lock in with that steady pulse, we were kind of swelling in and out, which if there's a 16th note of bleed or something like that, it's not a big deal. There was never any point where the piano went do 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 do. It was always steady. So I guess maybe you have to think about it and the technology, everything that Tina is mentioning. And one thing I like to also mention that I think is really interesting is, that's obviously one of the concerns here is like what music lends itself to this, all those kinds of things. But anybody who's done, and the ironic thing is anybody who's done an orchestration class is always told in an orchestration class, when you get a massive symphony orchestra, don't write everybody doing a unison couplet or something like that, right? Like don't have everybody locked in on, because everybody will have a different idea of what 5 against 4 is. If you get 100 players all playing 5 against 4, they're all not going to be in time in a concert hall anyway. So I kind of see that kind of analogy as well to it, so it's just another one of those situations. Like if you wanted something super rhythmically precise, you're actually writing something that's for a small space and small group of people anyway. It doesn't matter whether they're online or in person or anything like that. So yeah.
I will say about that piece, Not Yet Remembered, there's the way that it's a beautiful piece. It's nice and simple, and there were times where the entrances were meant to be on in time. I think Sarah and I were playing something. We were playing a few unisons, and what we figured out is that once we figured out what the latency was, we were able to compensate for that, because again, there's humans on the other end of that. So you can the more you experiment with it, the more you can kind of figure out, okay, well, if you know what if you know, what is it, the devil you know, right? So if you know what the latency is on that day at that particular time, because it will change all the time, you can kind of work with it. So, I mean, I would just say, go ahead and go for it. Do what you think you want to do and experiment with it, because you're going to get an answer. That's probably the only way you're going to get a real answer, as opposed to asking. Yeah.
That's great. That's a good question. Though. It's something to be addressed.
Yeah.
Do you have
Any other questions from, I'm gonna put my video back on so it's not a voiceless weirdo. Any other questions from anyone?
Do we talk about rehearsals?
Yeah. Sorry. Did you wanna? We have a way. We probably don't have a way. But
You have to come and stand in front of the camera.
yeah. What was your question? So we have one person in here. Sorry. What was your question?
You want to tell me about how your rehearsals work, like in this remote setting, or whether like actually the same as in person, like the kind of communication, or
Yeah. I'll let everybody kind of say something as well, but I think something that I can definitely, thank you for actually asking.
Did everyone hear the question?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the question was just, don't speak for you, sorry. But the question was just can we talk a little bit about how our rehearsals work? Like if we felt like they were different than in person, or I guess also like what goes into like a normal rehearsal, like the usual rundown of a rehearsal or something like that, and then how it differs, or what it's simple, or what it's like, or not like a normal rehearsal or in-person rehearsal, or whatever you want to say. Something I'll let everybody mention something, but something I definitely want to say is that, and I've mentioned this to Jerry a bunch of times too, I think one big thing that this did was that when I joined ContaQt in early to mid 2019, so I'm quite a late joiner to ContaQt, mid to late 2019, at that point, because of the spreadness of everybody from the Toronto center that ContaQt originally was, ContaQt when I joined, Jerry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was becoming like almost like a per project kind of act. So like they would, like I joined in order to go play Loud Weekend in MIT with ContaQt. And at that point it was, okay, we have this gig, here's our like rep, and now here's our series of, 8 to 10 rehearsals leading up to it, one every week leading up to it. But ContaQt wasn't operating like a rock band at that time, where you have a set time every week where you get together and you jam for an hour and you like live inside this material, as I like to say, right? So something nice that this really allowed us to do is it allowed us to get together every night, every Monday night, unless something came up, but mostly we would get together almost every Monday night for an hour and just play this material. We'd sign on around 8 o'clock. We take about 5 to 10 minutes sound checking or testing, making sure everything's good. Then we do a couple runs of some of the pieces that we do. And it's made us feel almost tighter as a group, because we're actually rehearsing every week instead of not rehearsing for 6-8 months, then getting together for a month and playing it and then putting it down. Like nobody's coming back to the material and saying, oh, I gotta remember how to play this now, or I gotta remember how this works. So yeah, I don't know, maybe some other people want to join into that too, but that's one big plus of it as well.
Yeah,
I know.
the as you were saying, like it was a logistic thing that for us, like we had built up a certain amount of repertoire, so that when we got together to rehearse, like for instance, for doing, like when Andrew joined, he was rehearsing for a specific set of gigs, and so it was a specific set of material. Now a lot of the material, some of it was new, but a lot of it was pulling repertoire from days gone by, so it was just pulling up repertoire. And so we were basically just getting together for gigs. Like, the one thing that this absolutely just really did was kind of say, okay, well, we're just going, again, it was a time where we were able to take a beat, and everybody made it, everybody dedicated a certain time out of their week to get together, and we just played what we could find. So it wasn't about repertoire at that point in time. It was more about playing together, and the repertoire was a vehicle for us at that point in time. So and of course things have changed slightly now, because everybody's back doing what they're doing and everybody's got their schedules. But it's great that we had that time to kind of really build that rapport with each other. Again, or rebuild that rapport. And Andrew was relatively new to the band when just before the pandemic kicked in, so it was great to actually bring him into the fold, and kind of, the band's been together for quite some time, so the first half hour of most of our rehearsals is us catching up and having a social time. So which was just a little frustrating for someone who might be coming out of it from a different from outside of the group, but it was a really great way to kind of just get to know how each of us was playing. And we just started listening to each other in different ways. So we heard each other in different ways, which was really a great thing. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, we got a thumbs up there from the question.
Okay, great.
Any other questions from anyone? That looks like a no. So do you guys have any like final, I guess we can do is like sort of, if you guys have some final thoughts that you wanted to put in before we call it an evening, but if you guys have like closing thoughts on the future of streaming rehearsals. But
I think everybody, like everything I would say would just be a reiteration. I think everybody covered all the kind of ground we want to talk about, that, this is a process, and it's something that, happens over time. It's not a quick fix for anything. It's not like, that was a big concern I had at the beginning of the pandemic, was everybody rushed to like move everything into another space without, kind of learning that process. So like, we never set up for it to be like a quick fix. It was always supposed to be an ongoing, our ongoing part of our practice, and become like, something that you experiment with and you learn as you do, and you fail and all those kinds of things, as you even see today with routing issues with streams. So it's like, yeah, I think everybody kind of mentioned that, like, it's less about kind of using this as a replacement or fix, and more of it just as another space. I think that's what I would say.
I'll just say one thing, kind of responding to the rehearsal question too. I've been part of a number of, or I'm still part of a number of online or remote. One is a global one. Two of them are. And one thing that I've noticed, and this is, I think you're picking up, maybe has happened with the ContaQt group too, is that it develops an interesting sense of community that seems. Jerry and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems pretty deep. That the way that everyone's needing to connect in this way it has generated. I mean, when we meet together in person, rehearsals, you develop friends and community too. This is something a little bit different, and it's quite compelling and hopeful to me.
Yeah. I will say this is, I don't want to open another topic, but the one thing that this has done is it's opened our eyes to a different way of playing, a different way of listening, a different way of being. I think if I can kind of maybe try to encapsulate what Tina was just saying. It's also what is really great about it is it's opened us up to, and maybe this alludes to what Tina was just saying, it's opened us up to now the potential of collaboration with people that we couldn't collaborate with previously. It's limited by access to the tools that we're using. So and these tools are somewhat ubiquitous. So as and I mean, I would love to get it to the point where someone can just collaborate with us on their phone. And actually that is possible. It's probably not going to be quite as deep as it is here, but we can literally do this with someone while they're on their phone, wherever they are. And most people have a phone these days that's capable of getting some kind of internet or something like that. So that possibility is amazing. So I think we've just really started exploring the potential here, and I really do hope that we don't see this as a fix for a situation that was temporary, and really see it as a way to move forward and move forward in a different way. So, and I guess that's what experimental music's about, right? So.
Great. Well, if no one has any further questions or anything else to add, I'd like to thank first and foremost Andrew and Jerry and Tina and Jeff for making this happen. That was, in addition to incredibly informative and eye-opening I'm a bit of a Luddite, so I found it quite interesting, and also it was a really gorgeous performance. Despite we were able to fight through some technical issues, and despite that, it really we got hearts in the chat, and it really sounded fantastic here. And also a big thank you. You can't see him because he's in the back making everything work, but Joseph Glazier, who is the Ontario Region Director at the CMC, he has been the main driving force behind this. And like I said, these will continue once a month, and we'll be covering a variety of topics. And I'd like to thank everyone who came to our first one. So, yeah.
Thanks for hosting us, August, and nice to meet you. I'm a Luddite too, actually. I'm a bit of a Luddite too, so.
The world is moving away from us, but we shall desperately try to keep up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank
everybody.
you.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.